This is a special press conference this morning about the tragic early morning fire on Sunday that took the lives of 5 children. First and foremost, I want to let the families involved know that our hearts go out to you, and I can't imagine anything worse in this life than losing a child. This is the saddest event that's happened in our community in decades. A tragedy like this impacts everyone in our region. It will take time, but we hope the parents and families will find solace and support throughout the Erie community. There is an outpouring of love taking place across this region. Our deepest sympathies go to the parents and families of the children who passed away. So that the public can know everything that we know up to this point about this tragedy and the follow-up since, you'll be hearing today from Police Chief Dan Spizzarni, Fire Chief Guy Santone, Coroner Lyle Cook, and State Senator Dan Laughlin. First, though, I want to acknowledge the presence here of Julie Strickland Gilliard. Julie, in the back. She is the Western Pennsylvania Regional Director for the Lieutenant Governor, and Julie Slomsky is here right next to her. She's the Regional Director for Governor Wolf. I really appreciate the support and concern of Governor Wolf and people in Harrisburg as well. I also want to acknowledge the presence of County Executive Kathy Dahlkemper and Gary Lee. Thank you both for being here as well. So we'll start now with Police Chief Dan Spizzarni to give us an overview of the events that happened Sunday morning. Chief.
Mayor, also I'd like to introduce Bill Haggerty from Emergicare Director. On Sunday, August 11th at 1:15 a.m., a reported house fire at 1248 West 11th was called in, and the Erie Fire Department responded with all available firefighters. A situational awareness broadcast was made by Erie County 911 to the Erie Police that Erie Fire was responding to a reported house fire with entrapment. Police officers in the neighborhood responded and immediately arrived to discover a house with flames coming out the front windows. The homeowner and her 2 teenage sons were able to escape the fire and told responders that there were still 5 children trapped on the 2nd floor. Erie Fire Department arrived and immediately entered the house, and over the next several minutes, they brought out 5 children between the ages of 8 months to 8 years old. All were in critical condition. Some were in cardiac arrest. Officers on scene began CPR to assist the paramedics who were still arriving. Over the next few minutes, the Erie Fire Department worked on extinguishing the fire and treating the rescued. Police officers on the scene helped with CPR, carrying ladders, moving hoses, even repositioning ambulances closer to the triage area. Crowd control was established as numerous neighbors came out. Erie Fire Department was able to extinguish the fire as it threatened the neighbor's house. A police officer transported a non-life-threatening patient to UPMC Hammett in his police car, while another police officer and another firefighter drove ambulances so that the EMTs could assist the paramedics in the rescue attempt. The Erie police detectives who are trained in fire investigations and the identification unit arrived to help the Erie Fire Department investigators looking for the origin and cause of the fire. Further, they assisted the coroner's office making notifications to the families and helped with the family as they arrived and identified the children. The Erie Police continue to work closely with the Erie Fire Department and the ATF to determine the cause of the fire in hopes that the knowledge of the cause of this fire may help prevent future tragedies. To all the first responders working that night, thank you. You know that your efforts are greatly appreciated. You continue working every night protecting the citizens of Erie. You must concentrate on your next call, but I'm sure the memories of this night will linger. This night's response was truly above and beyond any typical night we've experienced. This tragedy has resonated around the city, the state, the country. We're receiving calls from news departments in France and Germany because of the terrible situation that this was. I hope we that never again have to experience such a terrible situation. To the families and friends of these victims, you know that everything possible was done to try to save them. We grieve along with you. May all the thoughts and prayers of our community offer you some comfort in this difficult time.
Thank you, Chief Spizzarni. Now I will call on Chief Guy Santone to give us an update on the investigation to date. Chief Santone.
Thank you, Mayor. First thing I want to do is I want to recognize all the different agencies that were involved that night. Obviously, my guys and girls, Erie Fire Department, Erie Police Department, Emergency Care, all the dispatchers are up at 911, and obviously all the personnel down at Hammett that did whatever they could do. I'd like everybody to look to your left and to the back. These are the firefighters that tried to save the babies that night. Sean, Kyle, Chuck, Dick, Greg, Lenny in the back. These are the guys that went in that building to try to save those people. Okay, on with the investigation. Right now we're looking at an accidental fire. We're leaning towards electrical. Chief Fire Inspector John Wadomski in the back, him and his crew have worked very hard to pinpoint this. We took all the evidence from the electrical cords and we had them shipped out to have an expert examine them to make sure if that is or is not the cause of the fire. One of the things I really want to talk about today is the lack of smoke detectors. There is a loophole. There's a lot of talk about why there wasn't smoke detectors and why it wasn't investigated and inspected. I'd like to touch on that. There was a loophole back in any child care facility prior to 2004 didn't have to register with the city. They registered with the state. And the state hires or has DHS, Department of Human Services, they do the inspections. We were not aware there was a family daycare there. And there's one loophole. The second loophole is that when they do their inspections, they don't inspect for smoke detectors. They don't inspect for fire extinguishers. They inspect for things like cleanliness, making sure that there's nothing laying around that a child can choke on, things of that nature. And that has to stop. I called Senator Laughlin yesterday, and we talked about how we can change this. Any facility after 2004, they have to register with the city. Then we get involved, we go in and we inspect and make sure that they have the proper stuff. But we want to come up with a solution to make it so that every facility in the city, and I talked to DHS yesterday, and I talked to the representative, and I told her, I says, we can't do this. We need to know, because one of the other things that really irked me was the fact that they don't have to notify the local city. We don't even know where a lot of these are. They're not required to tell us. I told her, I said, by the end of the day, I want a list of all the addresses that are in this city. And they came through, they gave them to us yesterday afternoon. So we're working up a plan. Erie Fire, Code Enforcement, we'll probably get with the solicitor's office and create a ordinance that requires, and we'll get with DHS too, and the state, we'll all get together and see if we can solve this. And we'll create an ordinance so that every year, what we'd like to see, that these child care facilities have to re-register every year. That way, every year, we send our fire inspectors out there and they check to make sure that smoke detectors are there and they work. I think that's going to be a great plan, but it still has some work to do to get this through. Because my personal opinion, you can ask these guys too, we go to fires a lot. And we have very few fatalities in this city. And that's because they're smoke detectors. Smoke detectors save lives. I mean, as simple as that. So I'm not blaming anybody. All I know is there's some loopholes and we have to close them up. So I'm really passionate about this. We've been on this smoke detector kick for a long, long time. And so this really, I know it upsets the guys.
So we're talking about a city ordinance here, because I know Senator Laughlin wants to do something at the state level as well, so this would be a city ordinance requiring them to re-register, and what about, I mean,
Well, here's the problem, Lisa. The problem is, from what I understand, anybody that was registered before 2004, they're grandfathered in. That's where Senator Laughlin has to get in, and maybe we can change those rules. And then from that point forward, all child care facilities within the city limits must re-register every year. Now, whether that passes or not, I don't know. That's my recommendation and code enforcement's recommendation, and we'll just go from there.
Would the ordinance include looking for code enforcement violations, electrical stuff, that kind of thing?
Anything fire-related, okay? Right now, there's nothing fire-related being done on the inspections. So, and obviously, we all know that smoke detectors save lives, and that's what we're concerned about.
Chief, I know you were kind of talking about, do you know how many of these daycares there are within the city?
We got a list today. John looked at the list. There's 40 or so. And we haven't time to go through them all to see how many we know about and don't know about. But we're going to close that gap. I promise you that. And this is unacceptable. And this just can't go on anymore like this.
and those are 40 that have sought licenses, there could be more that are operating in unlicensed
Yeah,
fashion.
we don't know. I mean, that's what we're going to try to find out. To me, this is could have been prevented.
You said you sent the cords out for an expert to look at. Where were those sent?
Pardon me?
Where were for the examination for the cords for the expert, where was that?
I do believe down in ATF down in Philadelphia, or Maryland, I'm sorry.
They'll examine, like it's an electrical engineer. He'll examine all the wiring and he can determine whether or not that sparked the fire.
Can you speak to, I know we talked about this over the weekend, to where the babies were in the house with regard to the other adults? Because I think everyone is wondering if the two adolescents and one adult who were in the house could get out of the house, how is it that they couldn't have carried a baby with them?
I can't speak for that. All I know is from what I heard is that two of the older boys upstairs, they heard the smoke detector in the attic. But by the time he heard it, the place was already filled with smoke. And he called for his mother, and I'm just assuming on this one, she went downstairs to investigate and probably was overcome and then panicked and took off through the front door. I can't get into their heads and explain that. But everybody was in that second floor area. There was 4 bedrooms up there, guys? 4 bedrooms.
Do you know how many people were living there at the time? I've heard a couple different numbers.
Well, we're hearing 8. I mean, there was the 2 boys that got out. They jumped through the the bedroom window. They got onto the porch. And they suffered some minor injuries due to cuts. There were the 5 babies, and then the owner.
Another woman was outside today in her car and said she lives there. Another gentleman came up to the house that night and said it was his crib. So that woman said she's a sister of the 2 boys that escaped and that they're staying with her. So was there another family living in the house? And aren't most multifamily houses, don't they have to have code inspections and?
From what I understand, this wasn't a rental. She owned this house, so that she doesn't fall under that program. As far as anybody else living in the house, I'm not aware of that. They weren't there that night.
We'll have time for more questions at the end of the press conference if we get this keep moving for now. We get through the end.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Also want to thank Kathy Schaaf and Liz Allen from City Council for being here. And I know the 2 of you are hearing a lot of this for the first time, but we'll be talking about it in a lot of detail going forward. Next, I'd like to invite up County Coroner Lyle Cook to present his findings in this case.
Good afternoon. The one thing that the coroner looks for in any house fire
is to determine whether the victims were alive or dead at the time the fire started. So consequently, we fall back on two things: the presence of carboxyhemoglobin in the blood, which indicates that they have inhaled carbon monoxide. And second of all, we look for evidence of soot and that sort of thing in the airways. All 5 victims were initially examined. It showed that they did, in fact, all exhibit the soot to the airway. It'll take us about 3 weeks to get the blood tests back. But at that point, we waited until we heard from the investigators as to whether or not there was any credible evidence of foul play. And at this point, we don't believe that there is. Hence, I did not order autopsies on any of the children. The remains will be released to the funeral home later on this afternoon. And we'll fall back on the carboxyhemoglobin, the blood tests, as we do with all fire deaths. Are there any questions?
So the deaths were due largely to smoke inhalation?
Carbon monoxide poisoning and smoke inhalation. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Also want to acknowledge Curtis Jones from City Council, who I didn't see. He was kind of behind me, as well as Teresa Stankevich is here, I believe, too. Oh, there she is. Right there. You moved. You were back there before. Okay. Thank you, Coroner Cook. Next, I'd like to invite up Senator Dan Laughlin, who will discuss a co-sponsored memo he introduced this morning for the state legislature to address this. Senator.
First off, I hope to never have to do a press conference like this again as long as I live. The tragic events on the early morning hours of Sunday upset me very, very greatly. My heart goes out to the families of these folks that lost their children. I can't imagine losing one child, let alone all of your children. I don't even know how you go on like that, so that's very touching, and I'm not sure what to say about that. As far as how this tragedy happened, I don't think anyone in this room doesn't realize that it was a lack of working smoke detectors. And in this day and age, that's a travesty. There's different reasons that happened. I'm not here to point any fingers, but I can tell you this: I got to work Monday morning writing legislation that will fix that. Because, you know, I know you've all heard this before at press conferences after a tragedy, that this can't happen again. But unfortunately, it can happen again because there's thousands of these home daycares across the state of Pennsylvania that are unprotected right now, at least as far as we know. I've had a rather in-depth conversation with the Department of Human Services Secretary yesterday, Teresa Miller. She's very helpful, wants to be a part of the solution, and I really commend her for that. I know the governor's office wants to be part of the solution as well, and we all welcome that as well. I wrote legislation. It's not complete, but I have the co-sponsorship out today. I sent it out just before I left for lunch today. It's available. I have copies of it here. I don't know where Regina went, if any of the press needs it. It's very simple legislation. I'm not trying to create any legislation that's onerous that would be a huge financial burden on any of these daycare centers, because keeping the cost of daycare, keeping the cost down is important as well. But, you know, a quick Google search, I found a pack of 6 interconnected Bluetooth smoke detectors for about $100, and I think anybody can afford that. Just a matter of, in talking to the chief over here, the fact that they need to be inspected. DHS already inspects these facilities annually, and in talking to the secretary, we felt that, you know, even though their inspectors are looking for cleanliness and, you know, choking hazards and stuff like that, we think that with maybe just a wee little bit of training, they might be able to also include, you know, to make sure that there's working smoke detectors in there. or it might be handled by labor and industry or perhaps a local code folks. But somebody needs to make sure that there's working smoke detectors in all of these daycare centers. That's really about all I have today. I think that in talking to some of my senators, this will be bipartisan legislation that I think we will be able to get passed and done and over to the House very quickly. I don't think anybody wants to see anything like this ever again. So, Mayor, thank you for having me to your press conference.
Thank you, Senator Laughlin. Next, I want to make everyone aware of 6 funds that have been set up to help those who have been directly affected by this tragedy. First, today is Erie Gives Day. The Hammett Health Foundation will donate 100% of the funds they raise today. Erie Give Day continues till 8 p.m. tonight. As of 1:45, 334 individuals have donated $25,774 to help these families. 334 is the most donors contributed to any of the hundreds of charities that are participating in the Erie Gives Day. So that's the most people that have contributed to any. Second, Country Fair is donating all proceeds from coffee sold today to the families. So if you're thirsty for coffee, buy some at Country Fair before the end of the day. Third, the Lawrence Park Fire Department has set up a Northwest Bank account called the Luther Jones Family Fund. Donations to this fund will go to Luther Jones and his family. Luther lost 3 children in the fire. Fourth, Rupp Limousine is doing a donation raffle where people can enter to win a limousine ride for up to 10 people. All proceeds from the raffle will benefit the Luther Jones Family Fund. Rupp Limousine is donating the limousine and the driver for 3 hours to the winner. Fifth, donations are being accepted at Burton Funeral Home on West 10th Street. And sixth, the Celebrate Erie Board has decided to donate all proceeds from tip jars at the beer garden and the sponsor receptions. It's incredible how the Erie community has come together in response to this tragedy. Before we open it for questions, I want to take one more moment to thank our firefighters and our police, first responders, who showed courage and bravery in response. They put their lives on the line to try to save lives. Can you imagine what it would be like to arrive at a house in the middle of the night, it's totally engulfed in flames, and you can hear children crying inside? That's what our first responders experienced during the wee hours of Saturday night, Sunday morning. The families who lost loved ones are in our prayers as they deal with this terrible loss. We also pray for the neighbors, for hospital workers, for EMTs, for the police officers, and of course, for the firefighters who did everything humanly possible to save lives. Now, if there are any additional questions, all the presenters are available to answer those, and of course, if you want interviews, we can do that as well. Liz?
Joe, I just had one suggestion after hearing everything. You know, it'll take a bit of time for city ordinance and for state legislation. And Guy, I'm wondering if there might be a way to get to those 40 home daycares already and offer to get smoke detectors for them. It seems to me that we just put one in or 2 in a couple of months ago, and it was tricky because we were replacing old ones, and you know, we couldn't quite get them up there. I'm just thinking it might be a way to have like a really quick solution so people don't feel penalized, but I'm sure that there's a lot of home daycares that are looking around saying, do I have enough smoke detectors? It's just something to think about. Could we have sort of a rapid response? We'll get smoke detectors if you need them. And it's not like you're going to penalize yourself by asking for them. Because I know you've done when you talked about smoke detectors saving lives, I know how much the fire department has done over the years to make sure people get their smoke detectors. So I don't know if there's a donation or a grant out there. I know you've used grants before, but.
I know we were contacted today by First Alert, and they offered up some donated smoke detectors, and anything we get in, that's what we'll do. We'll send them out to the daycare centers that need them, at least get them started. And then
also that technical help too, just because I'm thinking I had a hard time getting mine installed, but we figured it out. But
yeah, we'll do everything we can to try to resolve the situation. Okay.
Chief, is it the position of DHS that life safety is not in their purview?
I can't answer that. I think life safety is. I mean, I just think that their procedures have to be re-looked at. But I would never say that they're against life safety.
And I wanted to ask both of you and Senator Laughlin. Senator Laughlin, is your idea that as long as DHS is doing the inspection, they learn how to make sure there's working smoke detectors in there too? And if that happened, that you wouldn't need to have them register every year? I mean, are you doing a two-pronged approach here?
I would rather have our people do it. They register, then we send our inspectors out and check. Then the way we know that this is done correctly.
So does your legislation mean that they would have to share the information with the city of where those were?
Currently, the legislation that I'm working on, Lisa, would have DHS do it while they're there. I realize there might be a little bit of training involved for their folks to make sure that they understand what we're looking for in a smoke detector system, that's all. But, you know, from my standpoint, if the chief's guys are doing it within the city, I'm totally okay with that. It's just somebody needs to be doing it.
I mean, they can let us know when they're gonna do these inspections. Contact our office, and then we make arrangements that we'll meet them there.
That works in a municipality that has people. I mean, would you, like, I mean, you're talking about solving this statewide, you're talking about solving it in the city.
It's the same goal, but just a different tactic. Sorry, I'll get in front of the mics here. In my opinion, Lisa, the statewide fix would be to have DHS do it while they're right in there inspecting anyway. It seems like the most efficient way to go. I think everybody in the room here has tested their own smoke detectors at their house. You know, you press the test button, if it beeps, it's probably okay. So I don't think it would take much more than a one-page handout to give them the guidelines that they would need. So I'm making the assumption that DHS can handle it.
As long as they let us know.
But you'd have to have the teeth to say you're going to be shut down if you don't have working smoke detectors?
Those are details we're gonna work out. I mean, we can't answer those right now, but when we get together, we'll work all this out.
Right.
I mean, we'll make it so that it's gonna work. I promise you.
And I intend to have input from Chief Santone as well.
At this time, is it known if a church or some other form of place was trying to also create a daycare in order to assist with these people?
Like a church create a daycare?
Yeah.
Well, they would have to register with the city. And that we will know.
Yeah, in recent history. In recent history, has a church tried to?
I'm sure they have, yes, they have. They have.
Chief, if I may, there was a St. John's AME church out on East 11th Street, I believe, and I was speaking with the building inspector this morning. The woman who had the daycare on West 11th did apply for a permit to run a daycare, but it was in the basement of the church, which according to fire code, the children being the age they would not be able to operate one in a basement.
See, when they register with us, there's a lot of restrictions. And then we make sure that they follow the code completely. It's the ones that we don't know about, we want to get our hands on.
Chief, I was going to ask, I know it's obviously a very terrible tragedy. Is there any counseling services or anything being offered on some of the guys that have had to deal with this?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. We started a program a couple of years ago. It's a peer review group. We have a couple of firefighters that have psychology backgrounds. And they recruited a number of firefighters, and some of them are here today. And union paid to send them to classes so that they are well-trained in critical incident stress. And they're gathering all their forces now, and we're setting up meetings with all the people that were involved and having a debriefing. I don't want to get into the details, but it's an excellent group. And obviously, if there is an issue, if there is, and it goes beyond that, we have other resources that we can tap into to have people talk to.
there's no other questions, and if you want to interview anyone that presented, you're welcome to do that.
Just as a reminder, where is it known where the fire generated from?
Yeah, the fire generated in the first floor, front of the building, in the living room, by the couch. What we've determined is that there, and I'd like to speak on this real quick, how important it is to, and we speak about this all the time, about extension cords. You know, extension cords have a place, but you have to follow the manufacturer's recommendation. You can't overload these extension cords. People have extension cords plugged to an extension cord to another extension cord, then have a strip, and they have all these different appliances, different items plugged into it. It may work for a week, may work for a year, may work for 5 years, but it's going to fail. Okay, it's going to fail. We go to fires like this all the time, where it's faulty extension cords. I implore people to pay attention when you have extension cords. You just read the manufacturer's recommendation, and you should be fine.
Okay, no further questions. That concludes today's press conference. Thanks very much for